Today on Context, homelessness in Canada. Researchers say they've got the answer to a national problem.
Tonight, 30,000 Canadians will cope with homelessness. 50,000 more are among the hidden homeless, staying with friends or relatives because they have nowhere else to go. Today on Context, is homelessness a chronic social condition? In a moment, guest host Sheldon Neil speaks with a Calgary man whose organization is on a 10-year quest to end poverty in that city. Get a street-level perspective and meet people on the front lines of this modern-day battle to end an ancient problem.
Homelessness costs our economy $7 billion annually, and according to some, for the last generation has been ignored. But researchers now say they found the solution to ending homelessness in Canada. The answer? Well, affordable housing. We dive into that and more, but first, to give us a sense of the problem of homelessness in this country, here's some fast facts.
Estimates suggest that more than 235,000 Canadians will be homeless at some point during the year. 35,000 Canadians will sleep on the street on any given night. 5,000 are unsheltered, while 180,000 stay in emergency shelters.
Well, despite the numbers, researchers from York University and the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness say there are solutions. These are found in their annual State of Homelessness in Canada study. Tim Richter, CEO of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness and one of the lead researchers behind the study, joins us from Calgary. Tim, thanks for being with us. The big takeaway from the study by the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness is that spending an extra $46 per Canadian a year on affordable housing could dramatically reduce homelessness. How does this work?
One of the things we did in the State of Homelessness was we were able to trace the rise of modern mass homelessness in Canada to the withdrawal of federal investment in housing. So over the last 25 years, we've seen about a 46% reduction in federal investment despite a 30% growth in Canada's population. We know that there's about 730,000 Canadians living in extreme housing need, which means they're living in poverty, renting, and spending more than half of their income on housing. Another 1.5 million in core housing need. So we're able to draw a picture of a fairly acute housing need. And so we worked backward from that problem to say, well, what would it take then if the withdrawal of funding was behind the rise of mass homelessness? What would an increase in funding need to be in order to reduce homelessness in this country? And we came down to an additional investment of about $1.7 billion a year.
How did you specifically, though, arrive at this number of $46 in your research?
Well, basically, if you boil down the incremental increase in spending that we're proposing, which turns out about $42 per Canadian per year, it gets you to $1.7 billion, which would be an additional investment. Now, it's important to remember that in 1989, Canadians were spending about $115 per person on housing. This additional $42 would only take you up to about $106. So we could virtually eliminate chronic homelessness in this country, drop emergency shelter stay down to about 2 weeks, and do that for less than what we were spending in 1989.
Your study concludes other recommendations to solving homelessness, but almost with a focus on housing at its core. We're talking a new affordable housing tax credit, housing benefits to assist those who have trouble affording their current accommodation, investments in Aboriginal housing, both on and off reserve. But what are practical steps the everyday Canadian can take to stop homelessness?
Well, you know what? I think there's pressure now, and there's a lot of interest at the federal level. We're hearing from different parties about investments in homelessness. We know that the thing about homelessness that is really important for people to understand is that to do nothing is more expensive than it is to fix it. So we know that homelessness costs the Canadian economy $7 billion a year. It makes far more sense from us on an economic and a humanitarian basis to simply fix the problem. It's cheaper, it's more efficient, and it's the humanitarian response.
Tim Richter, thank you for joining us. That was Tim Richter, CEO of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. He joined us from Calgary. Well, researchers say the missing piece of the puzzle in winning the fight against homelessness is affordable housing. Jody Ciuffo is the executive director of the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. She joins us from Ottawa. Let's get right into it, Jody. The problem of homelessness in this country is costing our economy $7 billion annually. In that, the cost of emergency shelters, we're talking social housing costs, healthcare and corrections. But the report suggests spending an extra $46 per Canadian a year on affordable housing could dramatically reduce homelessness. So that's good news. But do you see that figure as enough? And is this the answer?
Yes, I do see funding as the answer to homelessness, and essentially it's affordable housing is the answer to homelessness. It's absolutely critical that we have more funding coming in to take care of the affordable housing needs across the country, because they've been growing quite a bit over the years as the funding has been declining. With extra funding, we will be able to provide the varying types of housing that Canadians need to be able to live stably, safely, securely in their own homes. So by putting money in, and $46 per Canadian is roughly about $3 billion a year or so, it sounds like a lot of money when you say $3 billion. It sounds like a little when you say 46, but truly when you look at the whole economy and the cost of not taking action, it's a very, very small price to pay for safety, security, and health of Canadians.
You know, over the last 20 years, we're seeing a drop from over 20,000 new social housings built annually till today, looking at the numbers, 4,000, 100,000 affordable housing units have not even been built because of cuts. Define it for us. What is affordable housing? Well,
exactly. It isn't an easy definition because it's very big, actually. There are all sorts of housing forms, affordable housing. And essentially, you want to think of it as a continuum of varying types of housing. So affordable housing includes housing that is supportive housing, below market rent, so something that's just slightly below the average rents that people are paying. There are deeply discounted forms of social housing that allow people to pay rent based on their income. There are also forms of affordable home ownership and supportive housing. So it really spans a very vast spectrum.
Looking at the study that the Canadian Alliance to Stop Homelessness kind of put out there, there's like a disconnect. They're saying, you know what, we're helping people through programs get off the street, which is good news, but the disconnect is after they're out of the programs, there's no affordable housing to keep them on a path to a better reality. And I'm sure a lot of us can say, well, there seems to be a disconnect in that. How bad is it, do you see, on the front lines of this? Is it as bad as we're reading?
Well, what's important is always to take a look at that continuum. So what we're doing right now with homeless people, getting them off the street, is essential. But it's also essential to keep them housed. And how we can do that is by providing enough affordable housing, as I mentioned, across the spectrum. So the money that's invested needs to be permanent. It needs to be continued. And this is why we're calling on the federal government to do exactly that. Right now, you see, we had a stellar system. Years ago, Canadians were looked to as a model of superb social housing and public housing so that people were able to be cared for in our own society. What happened was that when funding was cut off for that, we lost roughly $2 billion in annual funding that went toward maintaining that level and adding to it. So what we see now is the fact that has gone from $2 billion a year to $1.5 billion this year. The funding ended in the 90s. Now we're down to 1.5 from the federal government. By 2040, there will be no funding coming in for Canada's social housing. So when we talk about bringing people in, housing them appropriately from off the streets, if we're losing so much housing, because about 365,000 homes, so that's almost twice the number of people, are at risk of losing their homes.
Jody Ciuffo, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Great. Thanks so much, Sheldon.
That was Jody Ciuffo, Executive Director of the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. She joined us from Ottawa.
Okay, I was 11 years old. My parents separated. I went back and forth from my mother and father for about 2 years. My dad gave me up to Children's Aid. I lived in multiple foster home, group homes, in and out of jail, drug use, worked for some people, felt that I got cheated out of opportunities. I've lived on the street for a long time. I've tried to get housing. I don't feel that there's enough support, money. All the shelters in Toronto are usually full. I just take baby steps. It's tough. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. You know, I know where I'm going to go and eat today. But the everyday thing and not knowing where you're going to sleep or where your next meal is coming from or where you're going to shower, who you can trust, who you can't, it's just hard. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm 36 now, like 21 years. I haven't had many breaks, and I need a chance, just like everybody else does.
Coming up, can faith in God solve homelessness? When faith hits the streets, that's next.
Lorna's Books, your chance to go deeper on today's topic. So, on homelessness, author Greg Paul and his book, The 20-Piece Shuffle, takes a great look at this topic as he delves into the issues of social class and shows how suffering extends beyond our borders and into each of our own backyards and hearts. So, write to us at contactswithlorna.com. Click on Lorna's Books for your chance to win a free copy of The 20-Piece Shuffle.
This segment is brought to you by Bruce Etherington and Associates, Family Harmony and Philanthropy, helping you help others.
Our next guest says the solution to homelessness in Canada begins with the belief that we are our brother's keeper. Dave Addison worked as a corporate executive for over 25 years, but one day something happened that changed his life forever. Take a look. Meet Dave Addison, a successful businessman. In fact, 25 years as a corporate executive. But behind the outward success, Dave was fighting an inner battle, and he was losing. He suffered from depression, so much so that he'd lost the will to live. He was over 300 pounds and an alcoholic. Feeling empty inside, his life was quickly spiraling out of control. Dave, explain to me who you were, the Dave Addison before coming to this place and the Dave you are now. Who were you before?
A guy lost, hurting, seeking and not knowing what I was looking for, but something more than what I had in my life. I was broken, not broke, but broken in heart and spirit. I had a calling to help people, and I was trying to help people, but I really was the one who needed help.
Feeling lost and in need of intervention, one day, a walk down a city street changed Dave's life forever.
I was out of work at the time, a pattern of losing jobs repeatedly, conflicting with employers because of values conflicts, a pattern that just kept happening. But I was walking with a young man that someone had asked me if I could try and help this guy find a job. Ironic, because I wasn't working at the time. But as I walked right past this spot, for some reason I declared to this guy that I hardly knew, I said, no one can prove to me there's a God. And I heard behind me someone say, oh yeah, I can. And it was this gentleman who looked to be homeless, with a cup out and an Angels baseball cap on, ironically.
And what struck you about what he said that caused you to say, I gotta stop and listen to this guy?
Because this doubt that I was feeling about God, and I wasn't feeling God's presence in my life, he had such conviction and such authority when he confronted me. I mean, he yelled out to me. And then as he started to quote scripture, he was convicting me that there was a God. And I felt like there was some reason why we were having this conversation, and I had to listen and understand more.
That day was the start of a more than a year-long friendship between the two. Dave provided him with food, clothing, and a roof over his head, while he in turn discipled Dave, sharing scripture and providing encouragement along the way.
And one day, I said to him, Frank, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because in the bigger picture, I'm out of work and I know I'm supposed to do something with greater purpose and meaning. And he said, Dave, give it over to God. Just ask him for forgiveness for all the sins, everything that you've done, and ask him to take over your life. And I did that on February 1st of 2010.
Tell me about what it's like just being back at this spot right now, standing.
Well, I'm flooded with emotion. I wonder where Frank is in his life, and I know where I am, which is a place that I couldn't imagine at that time. I was 300 pounds. I was an alcoholic, filling the hole in the soul with food and drink. I was depressed to a point that I'd lost the will to live, and now I have such joy, purpose, meaning. So it's an incredible journey, and one that I look back and I just thank God that I stopped.
Joining us now is Dave Addison, Executive Director of the Toronto City Mission. Also joining us is Joseph Taylor, Executive Director of Evangel Hall Mission. Behind solving homelessness in this country is the perspective that we are our brother's keeper. And this is a principle we see modeled in the Bible. I know not all of our viewers watching are people of faith, but we see this highlighted in the Good Samaritan story. Yeah. Taking that principle and analyzing it through the lens of homelessness, what do you mean by being our brother's keeper?
Well, Matthew 22 says, love your neighbor as yourself. And we should all be serving in love, living in love. And I think often with the homeless, we might be walking down the street and we'll look away. We don't want to make eye contact. My belief is that we should meet them face to face, engage them in conversation, treat them with dignity and compassion. That's what often is lacking, and that love and compassion can affect them and affect you in ways that are immeasurable. In your personal story, you came in contact with a homeless man, and there was a kind of dynamic exchange that happened. One, you helped him to get off the streets, temporarily got a roof over his head. He, in turn, introduced you to a life of faith. It's interesting because that same faith now informs what you do in your work at the Toronto City Mission. Do you think there is a link or something rooted in faith that can lend itself specifically to ending homelessness? I actually celebrate my faith at St. Paul's Bloor Street. And we're enriching our outreach ministry. So we're asked in the commandments to obey God, and that includes loving and serving those who are poor, some of the greatest of those being the homeless. So I believe that faith is key. My transformation, my salvation came through my experience with Frank, and I can't imagine a life not saved, being in the light, love of the Lord, and then serving. Joseph, I want to bring you in here as well. Evangel Hall Mission on a daily basis serves over 200 men and women, clothing them, feeding them, helping them to get shelter. Early in the program, we kind of heard the systematic approach to solving homelessness in this nation. You're on the front lines. Again, highlight some of the practical ways that not just our viewers watching, but many of us here could leave this studio space right now and say, okay, tonight we're going to do fill in the blanks. What are some of those practical ways?
Well, I think it starts actually with exactly what Dave said, and I think that this understanding that we're part of a community. and that the community involves people who are poor, disabled, whatever problem they have. And the one scripture that I often meditate on is Paul's discourse on members of the body. And he ends up saying that when one part of the member of the body suffers, we all suffer. And you can't look at somebody who's homeless or somebody who has, we have a dental clinic, a free dental clinic, person who has dental issues, and we're not doing anything to help them. And not say, the whole body is suffering because that individual is suffering. And I think that in the last 25 years, I think there's been a sea change in values in Canada. And I don't think it's been for the better. I really think that there's been this issue about greed is good, and I want to get mine, and and what is happening is we have a disparity. Some people are getting wealthy, while a lot of other people are either becoming poor or just hanging on.
I want to jump in there because you're raising a lot of issues in that one response. I'm wondering though, because if we're kind of going to infuse faith into the discussion, not everyone believes in God. Everyone, especially in this country, faith, church attendance stats are saying that it's waning. So not everyone's on the same page. How does faith, this is a question to both of you, kind of going off script here, how does faith cut through this? Because we're talking about 30% population increase. Affordable housing is not really being seen, especially in Toronto. I'm sure a lot of our guests here would agree. We see more condos being built. And if I'm just getting off the street and looking at a condo in front of me, that doesn't look like a direct reality. How does faith attack these very black and white issues we're seeing here? How does someone say, okay, God is the answer?
Well, one of the things at Evangel Hall, the group that I represent, the denomination, they spent $15 million of their own money to put up affordable housing in 2006. So that's one of the ways. That's not always easy, but if we don't do something it's concrete, then what are we accomplishing? And I think faith motivates Dave. It motivates me. I want to be somebody who, when I talk to you, it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in God, but because I believe that faith is important to me, and unless I do something to help people who are poor, I'm not acting out in my faith. That's what people need to see.
What do you have to say about the misconception that people who are homeless are there by choice, for reasons of mental health or laziness? Can you... let's talk to that misconception out there. I'll start with Joseph and then go to you, Dave.
And it is a misconception. Of the people that come to Evangel Hall Mission who are homeless, the truth of the matter is most of them are there because they've suffered severe trauma in their life at some point in their life. When you listen to their stories, most of them are horrific. I don't know anybody who chooses to be homeless. You'd have to be insane to choose to be homeless. Most of the people are there because they have, as somebody once said, they lost the parent lottery. Okay, so we have to be there for them in love, and it's love that heals a broken heart, but it takes a long time, and that gives somebody the strength to then begin to start to change some of the things in their life that they can.
Dave, what would you say about that misconception?
Well, Joseph hit it bang on. It's often trauma in the life, physical, emotional, sexual abuse. Possibly the person has conflicted their sexual identity, and a parent can't cope with that in the home. There are cases, of course, of mental health and addiction, a bit of that comorbidity that can occur, but we have to look upon these people with compassion, and not that they've made a choice. No one would make the choice to live on the street unless the other choices were worse.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for joining us. And if you would like to learn more about the Toronto City Mission or Evangel Hall Mission, we'll have those links up on our website. Dave Addison, Executive Director of Toronto City Mission, and Joseph Taylor, Executive Director of Evangel Hall Mission. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
After the break, I share some closing thoughts on solutions to homelessness in Canada. Stay with us.
I'm Rose Meter. I'm a mom, a wife, and an ER doctor in rural Canada. This year, my husband Rob and I have decided to take our 4 kids on a trip around the world. We have no idea what lies ahead. I'll be updating our journey on the Context with Lorna Dueck website with blog posts and videos about our triumphs and trials and adventures. Won't you join us?
Here at Context, we love to hear from you, our viewers at home. Recently, David wrote, "Your show is ridiculous. Hopefully no tax dollars are funding this garbage." Well, David, you'll be happy to know that our show is entirely funded by our viewers. And we'd like to take this opportunity to say how much we appreciate your donations to help us share Christian stories. Thank you for helping us make television we can all be proud of. Well, everyone except for David. Coming soon on Context, Commander Chris Hadfield takes over ground control at Context. Don't miss learning with us from Canada's best-known astronaut. He tells how lessons in space give us tools for life on Earth.
Earlier, we had occasion to raise the biblical question, am I my brother's keeper? The question is first posed in the book of Genesis, but later it saturates the story of Jesus Christ. In the eyes of Jesus, the answer is a resounding yes. So how do we apply that to homelessness? Well, based on what we've heard today, a good place to start might be with this. Let's eradicate the word them from the discussion. The wall separating us from them, the homeless, is an artificial distinction. For in God's eyes, aren't we all we? Jesus, who was in effect homeless for much of his ministry, never spoke in an us and them type of language. The fact is, we're all, each one of us, God's children. And some, by the grace of that same God, are blessed with a roof over their head. So what's to be gained by this themlessness? Well, with this tweak to the language might come a tweak in attitudes, which in turn might change for the better the way we all see and ultimately fix the problem of homelessness in Canada. Well, for all of us at Context, I'm Sheldon Neil. Thanks for watching. Join Lorna Dueck next week as we explore life beyond the headlines. Take care.
Not really by choice that they end up in that condition. From my understanding, and I have a cousin that actually worked with the homeless, it's usually the circumstances that drives into that, it's beyond their control. A lot of them suffers from mental illness. Schizophrenia, it's one of the major diseases that from my understanding, that ails them. So it's not something that they choose to, it's something that just they end up by the circumstances, and we need to help them out because they're at a point that when they're going through that, it's not they don't have the clarity of mind, or they don't have the ability to search resources or help themselves. So that's what we as a community, as a society, need to come in and step in and assist those. Everyday individualize, like you and I guess if I'm not in that field, just donating your time, try to contribute, go in and I'm sure there's lots of activities, lots of tasks that are required on a day-to-day that we can go and assist with. Bring in food, for example, little things like that, yeah.